actual sales.
Good morning.
Quite a few.
I'd like to call the Building Facilities Construction Committee meeting of Wednesday, August 21st, 2024 at 10 a.m. to order at 10, what is it?
I can't see.
Anybody?
10:04.
10:04, thank you. Okay. I'll go around the building and identify ourselves for the, to help the recorder. I'm Shirley Mazinski, Chairman.
Linda Brown?
Ray McClontz.
Fred Fontaine.
Bob Wermy.
And our administrator, Matt Wojcik. Thank you, Matt, for coming. The first item on the agenda, a potential new Building Facilities Construction Committee member application, which has been submitted, and I believe you all have a copy. And Carol Gogolinski is here, and if you'd like to come up and tell us why you would like to be on this committee, or if you want to wait and see how we do, and then...
Well, part of the reason is I'm on the Finance Committee.
Yep.
And then what happens on the Finance Committee is all this stuff is going on. At the last minute, they drop it in our lap, and then they say you're going to vote on it. So I'd like to know a lot more about it before these things get dropped into our lap. The other thing, too, is I think I could, my experience and everything, I think I could be a valuable member to you. I'm a licensed construction supervisor. For the last 40 years, I still keep up my license. I still do all my continuing education. I was primarily a home builder, and I did over 125 homes, 65 of which were in Douglas. So 65 families in Douglas are living in the homes that I built. And then I'm also involved with construction garages. You know, we had Pine, we owned that, we built that. Then I got 4 of them down on Douglas Road in Whitensville, Picnic Point Business Park. So I have experience with all that type of stuff. So I think I could be helpful to you. I know how to read plans, I know all of that stuff.
Thank you. So Carol's here, and I did check out with the Jen, the secretary, just to let, so there's no misconception. We are an advisory board to
Right.
the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
So anybody have any questions for Carol or discussion? And if you care to recommend her or just move forward and move her application on to the Board of Selectmen.
How you doing?
Any comments or questions?
She sounds overqualified.
Yeah. I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the selectmen to appoint Carol Gogolinski to the Building Facilities Construction Committee.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Linda Brown, seconded by Ray Klunk, to recommend Carol to the Board of Selectmen. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. All right, I hope you move on. We're always looking for members.
We're on all of our boards, aren't we?
I was surprised, Carol, I mean, because you had called me one time and said, hey, you want to come on the Finance Committee or
Yeah, right.
whatever? I'm like, whoa. Wait a minute. I'm on too many already.
I know.
All right.
Yeah,
but-
this is a 7-member board, so
Yes.
Okay,
we need.
All right, and right now, we're meeting the third Wednesday
okay.
and at 10 a.m. That's what the members chose. Sometimes
Okay,
some are
that's
on
good, 'cause
Zoom.
The master plan meets at night, so.
Yeah, I know.
And not at the same time, that's
All
good.
right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
I might stick around for a little while. I
Sure.
got another appointment, so I'll have to run off.
Okay, next item on the agenda is highway building project. And the last time, Matt, you told us it'd probably be on the November town meeting. How are we doing?
So, just a word about what you just did.
Yeah.
Along the way, I've encouraged Carol to participate in this process. I'm only going to respectfully disagree with one idea. We don't drop things in people's lap. It's just that there's a process that works itself out. by the time the Finance Committee sees it, it is a done process. It's either a yes or no. And there's not a lot of time for the Finance Committee to offer suggestions, because usually they're reviewing projects right before after the warrant has closed and before town meeting, to make a recommendation on what is actually a final proposal. The time for people who want to actively engage in the issue is well before that. So either from Building Facilities Committee or the Capital Committee participation. So I think it's very good for the community when we're trying to build consensus around ideas, to get people who have strong opinions and a lot of experience involved early in the process.
Sure.
So that when the final proposal is done, it has been fully vetted by people who know a lot about the issue. So that to me is a perfect storm of benefit to having different people involved in different projects. And that same thing goes for stormwater bylaw. The more feedback we get early in the process, the more likely it is to make it through the vetting process. It gets to town meeting, and the people who have the most concerns or engagement in the issue have already been through months of discussions, rather than trying to discuss it on the floor at town meeting. Because as our moderator often chastises us, we don't put theoretical concepts on town meeting. We're asking the voters to take final action, and binding action that usually involves money. And we're supposed to be doing this to get ready for town meeting. So I think that's a good conclusion to have reached.
And good points, Matt.
On the highway building project, this is where we're headed with this, and I asked for this to be put on the agenda because I think it's time to start the conversation about how government works and to manage everybody's expectations accordingly. We have gone through a process where Weston and Sampson and a committee of the town did a feasibility study and brought that feasibility study to this committee for its review. And if you go back through the process, it really was whether or not any of the properties that we identified were suitable for any town building, public safety or highway or anything else. And the conclusion was to identify a piece of property, or actually it's 2 lots, but they're two contiguous lots, that would be the best solution for any town construction of any building. The prioritization of the highway barn is the result of a different line of inquiry. It is, what building are we faced with the most challenges? What's the oldest? Where are the OSHA violations? And I'm not kidding, those are OSHA violations, and we're not going to escape the conversation. That's why the trailer's out in front, is to get our staff out of the smoke and the exhaust fumes and into a healthier environment. These 2 issues will be resolved not all at once. So in the private sector, if I often advised as a business consultant, the executive suite or the board of directors on whether or not to build a factory or to launch a new product and all of that. And you had to be completely fully sewn up, because the board of directors was usually outside, people being paid a lot of money to be in one meeting, some fancy resort somewhere. If you never got to enjoy it, you had to get up at 7 in the morning and do breakfast meetings with these people, and they were never very pleasant people. But the idea was, give me the complete project, soup to nuts, and we're going to vote on that. The government sector doesn't work that way. We move more slowly, and sometimes it's because we've identified funding that might be appropriate for a major step, but not for the whole project. So this is where I'm at, and this is my recommendation to everyone I'm going to talk to about this, BFCC, Capital, Select Board, is that the purchase of the real estate has merit on its own, and we have sufficient funds available from a couple of different sources to engage in the real estate transaction and lock down the property for the town's use. And that would be something we should do regardless of what building we build. So we have reached, I think, a very good place with the opposite party. in this conversation, I'll go back through the procurement process. We can engage in a real estate transaction without using the bidding process if the chief procurement officer, that would be me, certifies in writing in a memo that the piece of property desired is unique and meets its uniqueness meets critical needs of the town. When we identified this property, these two lots on Rydell Road, we had a number of reasons why I did certify this in a written memo. There's an existing electrical service that already goes back to the property. The property, it benefits from an easement. It is the only property that benefits from the easement. That easement involves a driveway that cuts the highway department and the fire station lot in half. So the only way to extinguish an easement is to own both the benefited property and the burdened property. This would be a huge win for the town to eliminate that easement so that we could utilize both the fire station and highway department property that we already own to its maximum potential with all its frontage on Main Street. You would still probably use the electrical service, but now you're not being tied to staying a certain distance away from the edge of the easement. And lastly, there is a small home pre-existing on one of these two lots that is fully up to code and has been rented and has a valid septic, electrical service, and a well. So that trailer can go away sooner rather than later in front of highway if we have a place for someone to work that is safe and secure and a fully operational space. So I'm thinking that we're going to kill a lot of birds with one stone here, and that's the way we'll proceed. The funding source for the potential purchase price, which we'll release very soon, but we're still in executive session territory here with the select board, so, because there's still a couple items, but I've identified the three funding sources in order of their precedence would be: one, I did not budget the full capacity of the town. When I did my budget for Springtown meeting, I left about $250,000 on the table. We also put a lot of money into an account that a lot of people are not familiar with. It's always in the budget. It's always at the end. It's called overlay. And the overlay account is the money the town holds back. It's funded by the taxpayer. It's raised and appropriated in case we have abatements of tax. So if a taxpayer comes in and protests the value on their property, and the Board of Assessors makes an adjustment, the revenue isn't lost to the town. The abatement backfills that revenue need for the town. The overlay account is released by the finance director to meet that revenue shortfall. If at the end of the year, the end of the tax protest year, which is in February, the finance director of the town may release the overlay funds for the operating budget of the town. Now, what are we doing this year? We have new growth that includes a warehouse valued at well over $100 million. So in order to protect the town from any protest of value, we left about $450,000. We put $450,000 into the overlay. So it was raised and appropriated in the budget, but won't be spent out unless CRG were to protest the value of the warehouse, which from the beginning we have felt is extremely unlikely. So here's August. They haven't made any noise about what they've been valued at. They have until, I believe, January to file the paperwork. We will wait until after February, but we think that the full $450 that we put in to cover that potential exposure is all going to be available to the town. So what we'll be seeking from town meeting is a purchase and sales that would be contingent upon that funding source being released in February. It's a little bit more complicated than the typical transaction, but we feel like we're on solid ground. So $250 plus $450, and then whatever's left over to fund the purchase price would be from free cash. But we wouldn't be looking to put the cost of the real estate into the bond for the
Okay.
building. And I feel that way because it's just, interest rates are such that we want to take everything out of the bond that we can and pay for it with cash, so that we reduce the interest rate burden on the taxpayer. Because no matter what we do, we can't refund that bond until we've paid on it for 10 years. So that first 10 years of the bond will be locked in at whatever interest rate we're able to get. It looks like some of the interest rate pressure is coming down, so maybe waiting on this project was a better part of wisdom. Municipalities still do get really good interest rates. We feel like we would go for a bond rating where our rating's going to improve based on the financial condition of the town. That's not locked in, but that's our position. We feel like we're in a much stronger financial capacity than we were 5-6 years ago when we refunded the high school bond. So it's all coming together rather nicely, which means that the bond should include only the building, all right, of a highway facility, because our recommendation is that the highway facility is the number one priority. So what are we doing now? For a project of this size, state procurement law requires that the town have an individual named as the owner's project manager, or OPM for short. And the OPM is selected using the designer selection process as contemplated under state procurement law. The designer selection process in Douglas involves the BFCC. So if we went out for a request for qualifications for an OPM, we would come through this committee. My recommendation is going to be that we not pay an outside firm to be the OPM. First of all, the building itself is not complicated. It's a garage. We have a lot of expertise already engaged in town affairs, working with construction projects of this kind. And we are allowed, under the statute, to name a town employee the OPM if they have sufficient engagement in the project and experience working in that field. That doesn't mean that we would not have an engineer. So I want to make it very clear. We would still have the services of an engineer. So what I'm contemplating here is, my recommendation is going to be that a town employee, specifically the highway superintendent, be named the owner's project manager to do quality control with the assistance of whomever he desires to talk to. I am going to recommend that we not go with our existing house doctor relationship for architectural engineering services for taking our conceptual design to construction plans. And I've reached this point because not only me, but several that I consult with, but also my own opinion as procurement officer, that I'm not being well served by this relationship. That careful investigation into the cost of building a building of this nature has gotten me to a band of prices that our fellow municipalities have been able to pay. And the traditional design-build model has gone completely and totally, in my opinion, out of control with highway bonds. So no offense to our neighbors in other Worcester County towns that have paid a lot of money for a highway bond. I don't think they did a good job really investigating this. I agree with the notion that a metal frame building with metal sides and metal roof creates a certain amount of what some people call thermal bridging. So it's very difficult to keep that building out of freezing cold temperatures, because the translation of cold, of temperature change through the metal structure of the building makes the whole thing really difficult to heat. And that's your best solution is a pole barn type of arrangement where you're using a different material, basically wood, with a metal skin, metal frame, metal components on the roof, and radiant heat in the floor. You create enough thermal mass, you keep the It's cold storage, right? It doesn't need to be 72 degrees. It needs to be 38, right? So you have much more stable environment inside that part of the building because of the approach you've taken to its construction. We got a engineer's estimate of cost on the building that was completely and totally unacceptable to us. And some of that was driven by the designers, the estimating designers' rather extraordinary design fee. And I don't really think we should be paying a hefty design fee for a building this simple. Like, there's no reason why we're paying a 7-digit number for engineering design on the type of building that many other jurisdictions across the United States is buying in a kit, right? They buy a kit, and then they buy the labor from, your, I don't want to call it a traveling circus, I don't want to jinx myself, but there are firms that specialize in building these buildings, and they come to Massachusetts, they get paid the prevailing wage, and they have to meet all of our insurance requirements and all the rest of it. But they're building a kit they're familiar with and have built many times before. So it's not like we're going out and having this huge competitive bid with all of the big names that we're used to regionally. You still have to do that. You still have to do that. But you know in the back of your mind that the people who are the most experienced are probably going to come in a very strong position in the bidding process because they've done it before. All of this means that it should not cost extraordinary amounts of money.
Yeah.
And I don't want to come out, I'm sensitive to the criticism, I don't think it's criticism, I'm sensitive to the observation that some people make, well, the town is doing well with economic development, so you're flush with cash, so now you're going to take dollar bills and sit in front of a fan like Jackson Pollock and just throw the dollar bills at the fan. It's exactly the opposite. When you're starting to do well financially is when you should be the most conservative, because you're looking for the long-term stability of the town. This is a gift. It doesn't mean you run out and spend everything. You hold back the resource and you put into place the assets the town will need for the next 30 years, because if the economic development thing starts to flatten out, you don't want to go right back to where you were, which is robbing Peter to pay Paul. You want to continue to have your flexibility. So the best way to do that is, what's going to cost us the most money? Let's spend money when we have it on the things that will save the town money in the long run. And having a really efficient building that meets modern standards, is a safe place to work, is a good step forward in the long-term financial stability of the town. So I'm very reluctant to put numbers out there on the cost of the building because I don't think it's appropriate. Any number I put out there is probably going to be wrong. But what I think we need to do is get the OPM in place, do a competitive design process that is clearly, the parameters are laid out very clearly. This is what we're going to build. We're not doing a traditional design build, custom this, custom that. We're looking for bids from people who can put in buildings that are pre-cut to specific dimensions, that sit on a trailer, they're delivered to you, and you put it up. Another component of this, site work. The lot is flat. So I don't want to hire out site prep work to some excavation company that is going to do a whole bunch of things, right? Prevailing wage, markup. We have a highway department. You can't work for a highway department unless you have a hoisting license and you have an OPM. And again, this is where we can use the services of an engineer for construction supervision and still save money. So basically, we're going to take a flat site, make it even flatter, and then compact it. It's not rocket science, and I don't think, and a lot of the folks whose advice I rely upon don't think that we really need to hire out for this. The estimating engineer was carrying a couple $1 million in the project cost for site work. So no, let's not do that. So that's where I'm at. I wanted everyone to understand the thinking that's going into it. So what I'm planning on is the real estate transaction would be on fall town meeting, and the highway bond would be on spring town meeting. for a bond issue. I also have to give my finance director sufficient time to really prepare for a bond issue. It really is the treasurer's responsibility to line all that up and work with our financial consultant. But sitting here now, I haven't done a ratings call yet, all right? I don't have, until I have a building design, I don't have a size for the bond issue. So it's turning into a little bit of a go-around, but I think it's all in the best interest of the town. By the time we get to spring, a couple of things are going to be done. The election will be over. The Federal Reserve will have met 2 or 3 times by the time we get to next May, and we're probably looking at saving 750 basis points, which will be well worth it on a 30-year note. So that's where we're at. Are there any questions about how we've gotten to this?
Does that time frame?
Hold it.
Sorry.
Linda,
Go ahead.
first.
Oh,
You
so
had your hand up. Sorry.
Sue would be this in-house engineer. We don't have one anymore.
No, so we would go through the design selection process to hire the engineering firm that would take us from the
It would be a firm.
conceptual design
Okay.
to final construction plans and do construction.
So it'd be the same thing, same process that we did with Weston and Sampson?
Yes, but we wouldn't be holding out any promise of being a house doctor or a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
It would be project specific.
Okay.
Right?
Is that time frame okay with the current property owner?
Yeah, so that was one of the things we've been talking about in negotiation.
Yeah.
I've been very clear about the rollout of this funding mechanism, so we wouldn't really be doing a closing until April or May of next year.
Yeah, so my concern is what if he wanted to move from the property sooner than that?
I think we've allayed by addressing it up front, I think we're in a good spot.
Okay.
Anyone else? Right? Fred, sorry.
There's probably thousands of these buildings out there already constructed. So can we just say, we want that?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's what led to this. It's really scary how things work. One of the selectmen works in this industry and is familiar with did some research and found a project that had been done in all places. You've never heard of it. Tiffin, Iowa. I know where Tiffin, Iowa is because my business consulting career, I spent 2 years in another place called Amana, Iowa, which you've probably heard of. Because some unfortunate soul who worked for Raytheon was doing experiments with radar, walked into the room where the experiment was being done. He had a candy bar in his pocket, and the candy bar melted. So 2 things came out of this. One, the poor guy was radiation poisoned and shortened his life. But they also discovered that you could use microwaves to cook stuff. So the Amana radar range, most everyone who had a microwave had an Amana radar range because they had the patent, right? It eventually became a refrigerator factory, which was 44 acres under roof, and that was my client. Tiffin, Iowa is like North Conway, New Hampshire. It's all factory outlet stores. So if you wanted to buy anything, if you were stuck in Amana, Iowa, you had to go to Tiffin. So I'm familiar with Tiffin. It's nothing like Douglas, except that it's about the same size population-wise and roadway. And they built a highway barn for their highway department that was about the exact same size as ours. Now listen, labor prices in Iowa are significantly lower than they are in the Northeast. But I can tell you they didn't spend a whole heck of a lot of money building this thing, right? So that's when it started, we were comparing what the architects were saying we would have to spend in Massachusetts with what this community in Iowa spent. It was like, no, they're not even close. So we need to follow the path that Tiffin followed, not the path that we follow in Massachusetts.
Anyone else? I do
Yeah.
have a couple.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So this bare bones highway barn, it'll still need plumbing, there'll still be a bathroom in it and all that stuff. It won't
So-
just be the house in the back. That will remain, the house in the back?
The house will remain there.
Okay.
And we'll use it. And it may cut back the amount of finished space we need in the building. But as many people in the industry will tell you, when you bid out these packages, the full interior fit-out is part of what they do,
Yeah, okay.
right? So when you're getting a
Right.
price, it includes the necessary
All the plumbing.
interior
Okay.
programming. All of the exterior utility work will have to be done with site plan.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Property-wise, any testing been done on the property?
We will not go forward unless we have adequate 21E work.
Okay,
So at the next select board meeting, there will be an agenda item. I will be asking the select board to allow me to spend some of the select board's budget for professional services for a 21E report. We'll be using the same environmental company we've been using for our work interior to
Yep.
this building with the fuel spill, because we really trust them.
yeah,
It is a matter of some discussion whether we will do some additional testing. I'm going to hold that back for executive session of the select board. I have a list of things that I'm going to recommend they
consider,
consider
yeah.
as part of that Phase 1 21E report would be in addition to that. But we all know what the hotbed issues are right now, and we won't recommend the town buy anything that will be a problem for it in the long run.
Okay.
We're not in such a rush to build a highway bond that we would ignore environmental data. We got to this point by doing due diligence on these lots, and they have been residential, and before that, they were forest. So we have no negative indicators at this point that we shouldn't pursue it, but we'll get a licensed professional to tell us we're in good shape before we go forward.
Have documentation.
Yes.
My other question is, in regard to these types of buildings, has consideration or discussion taken place regarding someone going out to see this type of building and getting information regarding how long these buildings last? What are some of the downfalls of them? Or what's the good stuff about them?
So in answer to your question, Madam Chair, this is pretty much a standard technology now.
I understand.
So part of my skepticism in dealing with the architecture firm, looking at the conceptual designs and the dimensions that were laid out, it was one of those scratch your head moments, because, wait a minute, I was just on a website with a kit that had the exact dimensions that the design engineer to this point has said is what they have for our conceptual design. And the reason why it was a trigger is because, and I know Carol's going to laugh when I say this, but you have to have an overhang on the roof, right? 6-inch overhang.
Yeah, right.
So you don't do a 90 foot by 40 foot, you do 90 feet, 6 inches by foot. So we looked at the conceptual design and said, wait a minute, that's the exact building that you can buy from the prepackaged building company that's a whole heck of a lot less.
Yeah.
So I think the game that they've played is they've bid up the cost of these buildings, and some of our neighbors, and I'm not afraid to say it, that whether it's Holden or Berlin or Charlton, they've paid these typical Massachusetts building project costs without doing their research, because what they really bought was a package building with a big markup on it, right? So that's how we've reached this conclusion. So the architectural and engineering industry is telling you that these pre-cut buildings or sized-up buildings are actually really durable and a good product. Good enough for them to specify without actually telling you
Yeah.
that they're specifying so-and-so's building, right?
Yeah,
So I hate to sound cynical, but listen, guys, this construction industry could be, you gotta be able to see through some of the smoke and mirrors to get to what's actually happening.
so again, my thought is, the person in charge of this building perhaps should, excuse me,
So, yeah, to answer that part of your question,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was
That's all
talking
right.
too much and I lost track of what I was saying. We've been out to see these buildings. Also, the three I named,
yeah,
we've been out,
you have,
yeah.
okay, thank you.
And they're nice.
All right.
They're really nice.
That's all I want to know.
They got a good product, they just paid too much.
Because to me, there is nothing worse than, well, there are things worse, but to have people that are going to be using these buildings, and it's happened here in town, that have, oh yeah, this is the best, well, we've made cuts in this and cuts in that, fine. But in the long run, it wasn't what they thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And there have been some problems, not with pre-cut, all buildings.
Yeah.
That's what,
So I will,
people that are going to work there,
Yeah.
and believe me, I went through this working in a hospital and having changes made in the layout of the hospital for better efficiency. They asked for the nurses' input, and we gave it,
yep.
and it was better. So that's all I'm saying.
And I'll rely on my own experience as well. When I was a town administrator in Tiverton, Rhode Island, we had a highway barn that was a metal building with metal frame. And what we ended up with a lot of the time was condensation inside.
Yeah.
The condensation would run down to the concrete pad, or actually the knee wall. And concrete and steel don't play nice together, or any metal. So it was rotting from the bottom up. They had installed hot air blowers up high with fans, trying to blow hot air down into cold air at the
Yeah.
So what it created was more condensation, because instead of dehumidifying the building, they were humidifying it
Sure.
from the inside. And listen, they made the building last 30 years, all right? Complete piece of junk. The people that worked in there were freezing cold because humidity makes it just feel even colder. You couldn't do washouts for salt trucks and the like, because now it was just really hard to maintain temperature. So it was a really dysfunctional building.
And it's moldy.
And it was, yeah, to the extent that you try to put insulation up, it didn't last because it would mold over. So the mold was, the insulation was taken out long ago. So that's,
Okay.
I can see the point that people are making about
Yeah.
thermal bridging, because I saw it firsthand.
Thank you.
Anytime.
I just want to make a note that Matt Benoit has come into the meeting, and, all right, any other questions before we move on? We're good? Okay, and the oil spill, Matt, we're still monitoring, and
Yeah.
is the fans working, better air quality, or?
Well, that's a proposal. I think we're still working on that
Okay.
with 21.
All right. All right, any questions? All right, under item 3, green communities, is that what you're pending out, Matt?
Apologize for being late in our office.
No, that's all right.
So I reached out to our green community coordinator earlier this month and asked what our funding is available for. And she said we have an opportunity to receive $275,000 in grant funds. But only $100K of that would be covered for school LED lighting projects. And that was a majority of the projects that we had to review. So that leaves $175 for additional projects, right? So what I have for you is the middle school LED upgraded estimate that shows that the cost would be $123,527. So the town would be responsible for the extra $23,527 if we were to apply for that. All right? And the additional 2 projects are also for town hall and the post office, which total approximately $85,000 between the 2. No, $87,000, sorry. That still leaves some room for opportunity. We don't have any other estimates from our, other than the heat pumps at the fire station, but we're kind of staying away from that right now. These are the only ones we have available now to apply for green.
Question?
Hadn't we decided that we were going to do the post office?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Questions, anybody?
Elementary school project turned out to be the most expensive, so I haven't submitted that one here today. They're only going to cover $100K. That one proved to be over 2, so.
are you recommending these?
Yes.
And if the town has to pay some,
We'd go to a town meeting.
Really capital process. Should be in the
Yeah.
capital.
Additionally, I heard from our consultant today, who said, if we install any lighting projects this year, National Grid is covering 50% of the cost. I don't know if that takes away from the incentives that it provides in this estimate or not. I need a little bit more validation there, but that would cover most of the grant, I suppose. But also, if we were to engage them in some of the other projects, that might bring the cost down. But that throws a complete wrench into everything I was talking about.
so are you saying, or Matt Wojcik? or-
So if we were to be rewarded this grant, likely it would come in November. And the op-
November, you
Yeah,
said?
yeah, likely to get all of these finished by December 31st, or unlikely.
Yeah.
Usually we end up doing these in February over the break, and that would be next year. So I don't know if they'd be eligible for the 50% cost reduction. That's more information I need to get from our consultant.
So, and you're not sure whether National Grid's new incentive would be for this year or for next year?
The incentives would cover this grant if it were awarded that are in this estimate. Those have already been finalized with National Grid. But
Okay.
the 50% coverage, I'm not sure. That's for projects done this year, but I don't know if we get these done this year. It's unlikely.
Anybody?
I'll get some more information on that for our next meeting.
Okay, so you're recommending we wait till the next meeting?
I think these projects are all grant eligible at this time, and we
Okay.
can submit these with our application. Whether or not the funds get reduced once we get the grant, that remains to be determined.
Okay, so we do need that information. Everybody good with that? All right. Any other information?
Is the committee okay with these three projects as presented?
Do you want to vote?
That'd be helpful, I think so, yeah.
I think it needs to be worded in a way that voted, but with additional information, or,
One way you could do it is a not to exceed restriction. So I think we would recommend that the project at the middle school in particular go forward regardless of funding source, because so much of it will be paid for by the grant.
okay,
The only thing that could happen from the information Matt just got was that the cost to the town put down. So I would say that the committee supports town administration seeking grant funding and prioritizing a project of not to exceed 127, whatever it is, for LED lights at the middle school. And I think that's clear enough. And if we find a way to reduce the town's share of that, then good for us. There's a lot of confusion.
yeah,
I went to the National Grid Energy Summit at Holy Cross, whenever that was, 5-6 weeks ago now. I'm not entirely sure I get our state government sometimes, because they seem to talk out of both sides of their mouth. You know,
Yes.
they want us to do a lot of energy efficiency and electrification projects, and then they start to say, oh, but we're not going to grant support that anymore. We have been to this point, but now we're not going to put our money where our mouth is. It's like, to this point, they've been great partners, and we've been doing all these great efficiency projects. I can show you the real impact of Green Communities projects in the town of Douglas. Our electricity spending has been flatlined, even though the cost of electricity on a kilowatt hour basis has been up and down quite a bit, mostly up, because we've reduced our usage by so much. So I think what's happening here is a little bit of a switcheroo, where the state wants to prioritize its money for certain projects. And most of what they get activity around is LED projects in school buildings, because they tend to be our biggest and most inefficient buildings. And they've said, grid, if you want that, you go ahead and you find a way to incentivize those projects. We're going to focus on XYZ, electric vehicles, heat pumps, automated building systems. That seems to be where they're putting their grant money. That's all well and good, but what it does is it creates the confusion that we're seeing today, right?
Yeah.
So where are we? I think where we are is, we're so deep into the DOER grant writing season that we should go forward with 127 and change with the current breakout, because there is a grid incentive baked into that. And if we, because I think there's going to be a bright line here, Matt, I think grid's going to say, it's one or the other, you can't do both, which would make sense to me. There's no double dipping on the,
Yeah.
but we don't have that nailed down today. We'll just say a not to exceed amount, and that way you know what you're voting. You're voting the project. And you also know that the way this has been laid out, that's going to be our application, right? So the town's share would be whatever's above 100,000. If we find a way to leverage that with additional grants, then good for us. But it won't be any surprise to you if we go to town meeting or capital committee and say, we need 27,500, whatever it is, dollars,
Right.
because that's our share of this project. Which we've done before. Was it streetlights, I think?
Yes,
The town
we did.
put in a share.
Yeah. So Matt, it was what, 123,527?
Yep.
Okay.
The total of all three projects is 208,538.
280,
208,538.
208,538.
So the motion should be for 3 motions or just one full motion?
what?
What would you like the motion to be so we get it right
Pursue green community grants for funding for all three projects,
with a dollar amount not to exceed?
not to exceed
And what would that be?
210,000.
So moved.
Smack down. That's what we want.
I've served on a lot of boards.
Motion made by Linda Brown,
Second.
second by Bob Wormy. That's what we want.
There we
Yes.
go. Perfect.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Thank you for getting the information and update us if you get more. Thank you. Anything else?
I forgot to mention the return on investment is significant on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to municipal main roof replacement.
So the air conditioner's so loud you can't hear it, but they're up there right now.
Oh, good. Okay.
They move a piece at a time,
Yeah.
and what that's done is it's reduced our concern about rain. So the last time we did the roof here, our dear, dear friends at Greenwood came, stripped the whole roof, and the thing leaked like a sieve anytime it rained. So we quote unquote ain't doing that.
Especially with the weather the way it's been. Yeah.
Yeah, so the crew is up there, the lowest bidder. They've submitted a couple of requests for information around some of the tie-in, around the flashing, around the parapet, and the removal of the units, but I think you've seen it. The crane was here, all the rooftop units are down on the ground behind the building. The dead ones will go away. The new ones that we just installed will go back up and be back up. I think the project's moving along at a workmanlike fashion, and we're pretty happy so far.
Any questions?
You don't know until it's all done.
Yeah.
The only thing I would remind people is, I know the agenda item is main roof replacement, but the way this was, town meeting combined
Yeah.
the projects of the elevator shaft roof
Yeah.
with this, so it's all being done at the same time.
Okay. Any questions, anybody? We're good? Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Go back to the green community motion. Could we
Yeah.
amend that motion to make it 215,000 cap? Because usually we pay CMRPC 5,000 to administer the grant.
215?
Yes, instead of 210, just amend it to be 215, so CMRPC can administer the grant as they wish. They usually have that.
I'll make a motion to amend that motion. My motion.
My mistake.
215,
Do I hear 220? Do I hear 220?
215, good.
okay. No additional 215,000, whatever. Okay. Do I, and Linda
Bob
made the
seconded.
motion? Bob second? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? So voted. Thank you. Okay, municipal fire alarm is still on hold pending the roof being done, am I correct?
Yeah, and I just, again, trying to manage people's expectations. This was a 2019
Yeah,
estimate for trying to make something work,
yeah,
and that's not where we're going to be at. We
on the
will-
fire alarm.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll end up going back to town meeting and supplementing that. It is obviously going to be 2025, so 6 years will have passed. But we're also, I don't want to say hell-bent on doing this correctly. So we have fire alarms in the basement for the police station as well as here. They are connected to one another so they can all be monitored downstairs, dispatch desk 24/7, which is good, but it also means it's a little bit more complicated piece of equipment. What we have right now is two systems that are kind of, sort of talking to each other, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, needs
And
to
the
be.
parts aren't available for replacement, so it's in a tough spot. It will be somewhat more expensive, good deal more expensive than what we had originally estimated, but
Okay.
it'll be a better result. What's going to happen here, just to tie all the ends of the story together, one of the ARPA projects is to bring water, replace the water pipes, very old water pipes under Depot Street. When we come by this building, we're going to separate the domestic water service from the fire suppression service. And the project will include bringing in enough capacity to sprinkler this entire building, including the second floor. So that design, sprinkler design, needs to marry the fire alarm project, because the fire alarm and the sprinkler system need to talk to each other, be part of the
Yeah.
same solution. So it may be quite some time before we finalize the fire alarm design.
Okay, so we'll keep it on.
Keep it on.
Yes. Okay, any questions? Fire station upgrade,
So this is one of those praise the Lord, hallelujah moments. It looks like we're going to have construction bid documents done by the end of this week. So we should be out to bid. We finally cut through some of the confusion. This is Weston and Sampson working with McRitchie
yeah,
and determining whose job it is to do what. So we had a come to Jesus meeting where we sorted that out. But it was all's well that ends well, and I think everybody knows what their job is, and they've been proceeding with good pace. They were here last week doing a tour of the building, programming all the space, determining the amount of receptacles we need, and all the rest, and that's pretty much being sewn up.
okay. Questions for either Matt? Okay. Vacant buildings in town.
Did we skip stormwater?
Stormwater management, I'm sorry. That's just informational for us, and you were looking for people to join a
We're still
group.
looking to populate the stakeholder committee. The select board finally completed its work last night in terms of establishing the committee, where the sources of appointment would be, how many people will be on it, what their time frame is, and what their charge is. So this is a 7-member committee that will be advisory to the town as a whole on the stormwater bylaw proposal that's part of the MS4 permitting process. This is Matt's baby over in community development. There will be one representative from the select board, which is Selectman Stevens, Les Stevens. Planning board and Concom to be decided, finance committee to be decided, and 3 members of the public at large, so that's a 7-member committee. The board did appoint Adam Furno, the highway superintendent, to be one of those 3 members of the public at large. So the committee's starting to come together. Interested parties should reach out to Matt and to Lisa Freeman in the Select Board's office as soon as possible, because this committee needs to get its work started. What we want is to review the proposed stormwater bylaw in the context of that committee between now and January. And then from January to roughly the beginning of April, their recommendation will be vetted through the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board. When it gets to the Select Board to be included on the warrant, it should be a finished product, but there will be another weigh station. The Select Board will review the bylaw before putting it on the warrant. So it's a little bit different process, so that
Yep.
there are now 4 or 5 different ways for interested parties to engage this discussion.
Yep.
The later you get involved, the more likely it is, it'll be hard to change the wording, because it will have already reached consensus with a certain number of people by the time you get to the end. But I thought we had a really good meeting with the federal authorities and state authorities on this issue, and have a much better sense of what the parameters are for the bylaw to be required. The one thing I will say is that I want to reiterate this point every time I get behind a microphone in a public meeting. What is the permit? And a lot of people don't know what the permit's for. And I won't do a Socratic method going around this room. The permit allows the town of Douglas to discharge stormwater into the Mumford River and other watershed that's been protected under the Clean Water Act. That's a very valuable permit, because the alternative is to manage that stormwater in a different way, which could be very expensive. So that's why it's important. And if you doubt me, you can go to the corner of North and Gilboa on a really rainy day and get out of your car and go down to the bottom of the hill next to the Mumford and look above you and see all the culverts discharging huge amounts of water into the river. That's where we put this stuff. And we have to comply with certain regulations as to the quality of the water that we're putting into the river in order to be allowed to do it. That's what this process is about. I think we're going to end up in a good spot, because I think what we've been able to sort out with the feds is that a certain amount of what our consultant had in the proposed bylaw wasn't necessary. So I think people who had concerns will be relieved to see some things can be changed, if they desire to.
Yep. And again, it's still very important, as you have mentioned, the quality of the water, because when I came to Douglas, it's come a long way, baby.
We have trees now.
Well, yes.
You left yourself wide open for that one.
It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me, because I know what it's been like,
Yeah.
and what many, many people in this town over the years, some are already gone and some have moved.
When there was no water sewer treatment plant.
Yes.
And it was
No
as flush as you go.
And
And Guilford of Maine had a pipe under the river and
That's right.
and it was,
put out whatever they put out.
yeah.
But doesn't
Not
have to.
not only Guilford of Maine,
Yeah, I know.
and we've had colorful water
Yes.
and contaminated water.
And foam everywhere.
Thank you.
I can
I'm
remember
glad-
standing at Thunder Mist Falls in Woonsocket as a kid.
Yes, I've been there
When the
too.
Seville dye plant was in full operation, you could tell what they were making that day, because that's the color of the water was
Yeah.
when I went over the waterfall, and the foam would reach halfway up the waterfall.
And that was down at Lackey Dam, too.
Yes.
Okay, questions regarding what Matt has told us, and I'm glad to see that moving on.
I have a
Yes.
question, listening to the selectmen's meeting
Yeah.
last night online, and is it just for the immediate Mumford River area that this board is going to look at?
I don't know for sure. We've been
Okay.
given a map.
Yeah, I circulated the map yesterday. I will pull that up for you.
Is it online anywhere? I didn't see
You
it.
can add it online,
Oh,
absolutely.
So the areas they've mandated be protected, I'm sure there's Mumford River watershed involvement.
Absolutely.
There's nothing on the Quinsigamon watershed side of town. But the northeastern edge of town I'm going to assume is all Mumford River
Right.
protection. Yeah.
Yep. There's a map. I'll show you.
Okay, and any information you can, for the next meeting,
It's just this area of town.
okay?
And there's a
We
little
we just keep
over
the
here.
board
It's
informed.
just the red highlighted.
Exactly.
Information out there.
Oh, so that's nowhere near me. Wow, that's like maybe a quarter of the town.
Right.
Okay. Kind of like I had mentioned one time, that Mendon only had a certain area.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what I
So that's
had-
like a minimum
Yeah.
of what the
That's
state requires.
And that's
Yeah.
what I think you and I both brought up, to look at Mendon's,
Mendon actually
Stormwater.
had a map and all
Yeah,
that. Okay,
management.
thank you.
Shirley,
yes,
could I ask a question?
sure, Carol.
For Matt. Matt, could you make a copy of that so we could see it at our master plan meeting tonight?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right? Okay, vacant buildings, I have to move on.
Yeah.
A whole lot of change here.
Oh,
So,
not a whole lot or a whole, oh.
Fred, you were really interested in the old fire station, and has anything been done on the safety?
No.
But that's a safety issue.
Oh, with the towers.
So we need to know where that's going, because if we sit here and it's a safety issue, what's being planned and have it done? You have any comments on that, the issue that you were looking at?
You know, if nothing's been done, what could be said? Other
Yeah.
than something needs to be done.
Yeah.
So could you maybe discuss this with Adam or whoever was supposed to be,
You mean for the building or the towers?
even the building, there was something, some side.
Oh, no,
that-
there was a soffit there. that I
Yeah.
wanted to run up and replace. The safety issue, I don't want to tell people there's nothing been done. We removed the stairway, so we've restricted access to those parts of the
True.
building that we worry about. So we proactively did that. But the longer-term plan here is that the highway barn will be built to a size so that all of the equipment in the old fire station can be stored there. And our future use of this building will be up in the air. And I think the conversation there is more broad-ranging and involves the Historical Society as well as the Historical Commission, and just how much of this do you want to save? I think that's not on my radar screen right now with all this other stuff that we've talked about today going on. Because I think it's a more involved conversation. Some of it might actually depend on whether or not those in the town who are advocating for the Community Preservation Act are successful at the ballot box or not. Because we would need resources to save the building. I'm kind of a sentimental person, and I like historic preservation projects. You know, walking along and seeing the hooks with the names of people that everybody knows here in Douglas, worked for many, many years in what was a volunteer fire department, is really cool. And you want to try to preserve that for the legacy of the town. At the same time, the roof's falling, there's nothing you can do
Yeah.
about it, except either fix it or let it come down. But I think that's the conversation we haven't engaged yet, because it involves a lot of people who are otherwise occupied here with these different projects.
And
At the same time, it can't fall by the wayside, I get it, and
Right.
we'll put it on the
and it's more
priority
the,
list for the next.
the Historical Commission. I mean, input from people in the town is great, but it's under a town committee.
Yeah.
Don't
All
think
right.
safety, again, recalling that safety concern I had is how easy it is to climb those towers because the pegs are still there.
Yeah.
But now since I've seen that and I've seen other towers similar out and about, it's fairly common, they're there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so.
Matt, regarding the survey at the Douglas elementary school.
I have two quotes.
You did get 2.
Yeah, both are less than 10K, so we don't need the third,
Okay,
but we just need to determine which one we use.
okay.
And who would do that, the selectmen?
No, I would do that, under 10,000.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay. Questions regarding that? Okay. Library Board trustees, and they were looking for input from Weston and Sampson and you.
I'm kind of throwing a monkey wrench into that, aren't I?
No, we won't let you get away. We'll keep bringing it up,
You can keep bringing it up.
but you will, yeah, I know, they've been busy with what you're trying to do up there, but,
Well, I'm managing a vendor relationship to a certain conclusion, right? So if you're reading between the lines of what I've said today,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get them to finish their work before I give them any bad news.
okay.
I just told them, but I don't think they watch these meetings, so I'm not worried. They should be, actually, as a house doctor, but different set of expectations, sorry.
Okay, anyone? Questions? It'll stay on the
Yeah.
agenda.
So does that mean,
Ellie?
yes, I'm sorry. Does that
From the
mean
library
that,
board.
It wasn't going to happen a week after the last meeting? Whatever,
No, I think we've evolved since then. We've had, I'm an old-timey baseball player, right? So I believe 3 strikes, you're out. I've had 3 conversations with this architectural firm that is our house doctor, and I haven't gotten any progress from them, so I know what I have to do next. So it did happen, it's just, it didn't go the way I wanted it to.
so back to square one with the library, pretty much.
Well, it's square one. I just think that I don't want to keep feeding projects to someone if we don't get the results what we're asking them. And when they were hired, the highway facility was the highest priority, and we told them, you need to hit a home run with this, and we can work together for many years. And because we haven't gotten there, I'm reluctant to make more commitments to them on more projects when they've disappointed on this one. So that's kind of where the thinking is evolving, but it evolves every time I talk to them, and I don't make the headway. I feel like I'm throwing facts against the wall with these guys. Like, it's overpriced, guys, you got to come down. So
When is their contract up?
it's not really up. Our award letter mentions that we're hoping for the relationship to last for many years, but we did not sign a contract to that effect.
Okay.
All of the contracts we have signed with Weston and Sampson have been specific to each project.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we need to,
What the authorization of the house doctor designation meant was I didn't go to a designer selection process for each and every one of those individual projects. Their designation as house doctor meant that that was their work to do, but each piece of work was an individual contract on the theory that they basically work at will for the town, and if they don't perform, we don't have to give them the next contract,
Okay.
that
Thank you.
3-year period.
yeah, one question? Go ahead, Ellie.
and I only put up my,
Could you speak
Yeah,
up,
no,
please?
no, I'm
Can you speak up, please?
yes. So what's our next step, Building and Facilities Construction Committee? To should we go out and hire a structural engineer? Or, I don't want to go to an architect, but, because I agree with what Matt has said about the fluffiness that seems to go into Massachusetts designs and stuff. So what should we do? That's what the library is asking next. So we have a meeting next week, and I just think we have to be advised by you, the advisors, of what to do next.
Any recommendations?
So what our hope had been was that Weston and Sampson could give us an estimate of what it would cost you to retain them, presumably, to do the conceptual design that, or initial feasibility that you wanted for the library building. And since we're not really in a comfortable spot with that, I guess the trustees' choices are to wait for the town to forge a new relationship with another firm, in which case you may be included in that conversation, or do it on your own. My recommendation to the trustees would be that they go on their own, because I feel like I don't want your needs to be subsumed under a broader conversation at this point. And we've made you wait long enough, and I think it is time. You can make your own decision on how much money you want to spend out of what you've raised for this service. And if you want us to help with a background check or feedback from other communities, we can be a resource to you and help you with that. But at this point, I feel like you're coming to these meetings, you're hearing that the relationship needs to change, and that was a relationship you were relying upon. So I feel bad in a way that you're being dragged into another meeting every week, or every month, not every week, every month, and not getting a conclusion. So, I mean, I guess we can offer our advice and good services in support of what it is you want to do. We can zoom into your meetings and give you some thoughts. But I don't think you should be held up any longer. I actually think the trustees should go forward with their own inquiry, because you don't have to spend a dime. You can do an RFQ for designer services, see what it is that you get in response, and make your own decision.
Yeah, but we don't really, we've had 3 architects to draw designs and stuff like that. We really don't want to spend money on that. We just want to know the right steps to take, and that's what I would think that the Building and Facilities Committee would offer us.
I don't know what you mean by right steps to take. You know, unfortunately,
Or what's the purpose of the BFCC?
we were making the town's mechanism available to you from the hope that maybe you would get better service or a discount or both from a relationship, a design relationship we were part of.
Or should we get a structural engineer as opposed to a design, whatever?
So procurement-wise, it doesn't matter what you call it, as long as it's an architect or an engineer. What you're doing is getting a design contract, using the design selection process under Section 7 of the Massachusetts General Laws. And you don't even have to have an OPM until you reach a project of a certain size. And if I understand your project correctly, you don't contemplate spending that much money.
Hopefully not. No.
So all you really need, though, the state procurement laws require you to have a designer of some form engaged in the design bid-build process. So it is the choice of the trustees whether you feel that the product of an architect is more reliable or less reliable than the product of a structural engineer. In my career, I've hired structural engineers to evaluate existing structures for their integrity, not to do conceptual design of a building expansion or rehab. Having said that, though, if the trustees determine that the main core of the project they want to do is within the existing building, then maybe a structural engineer is the way to go, because they'll advise you on what your building is capable of handling. And if that's a viable way forward, if you're going to stay mostly within the footprint of your existing building.
Okay, and can the town give us suggestions for structural engineering?
We can do that. I mean, so It won't really be the town, though. It'll be a state agency called DCAM, the Division of, oh boy, here I go. I think it's Construction, Asset Management, and something else. It's part of the Department of Administration, and if you're certified to do work in Massachusetts for structures of a certain size and safety requirements, you have to be certified by DCAM. So the list of people who can help you with this will be a DCAM list. So the town is restricted. When we do, we can only choose firms that are on a DCAM certified list.
Okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
If you can clarify for me. So the library is a town building, so why is, it isn't? So that's the reason why they have to spend their funds to get the architectural or engineering firm.
This is one of these really interesting, cool, unique features of Douglas. You've got some hybrid arrangements around different buildings and different institutions in the town. So you have the Wallace Devise, which largely deals with the clock tower on a building, not even the whole building. With the trustees, that building is entirely under the control of the Board of Trustees, the asset, because it was deeded from the donor to a Board of Trustees. Now, the hybrid arrangement comes from the fact that the way the deed was set up and the restrictions around it, it is a board of people elected by the town, right?
Yeah.
That manages the building that is not controlled by the town. So,
Yet it's town maintained
but it's,
to an extent.
Yeah.
yeah, we happily support the library with town funds when the opportunity arises, but the actual control of the structure and the decisions around it must be made by the trustees. They have to follow Massachusetts law. They can use us as a resource for guiding them in that process. But in the end, it is actually not the select board's decision. Now, I think, if I remember I think the trustees,
Most libraries.
right, the trustees, I think, go to town meeting
The trustees, yeah.
if funds are required.
Well, they are, our operating budget
Yeah.
every year is
No, I mean, for the building.
for the, well, yeah, we've been rejected before. so-
Yeah.
So that's why we're doing our fundraising too, it's trying to say to the town, look, we raised all this money and we don't want, all this fancy stuff in it. We just want to get the place available to be used by the handicapped.
Yeah.
So that's all we're trying to do for, 19 years or whatever it is that we worked on it.
Right. And as I've said before, this is going back to when I worked for the governor of Rhode Island, there are people you don't argue with. You don't argue with librarians and library trustees. You don't argue with funeral directors, or independent pharmacists, or purveyors of alcoholic beverages at wholesale. So that's really it, right? So the state has a division of library services that has its own mandate and its own way of doing business. Unfortunately, and this goes back to a point I made earlier about the state having mandates, that local entities kind of scratch their heads and say, what? Right? So every time our trustees go to, I'm paraphrasing here and I'm summarizing, it might be a little bit too brusque, but they have their vision of what a local library should be that is somewhat grander than what a lot of local boards of trustees are able to provide with the resources of their community. So sometimes people go for it. They'll drive through a town not far away from here and see a very nice library building that was way more than that community would have afforded on its own. They decided to participate in the process, the DLS process. We haven't been able to get traction with it because it just comes back to be a really expensive project. I guess, it's up to the trustees whether they put that on the town meeting warrant or not, but if you feel like it won't pass, then I guess that's the better part of wisdom is to not do it.
Yeah, that's when you pursue the state grants, and they pay like 45% of a construction for libraries to do renovations or rebuild or whatever. And, but they are so expensive.
Yeah.
I think it would be 10 or 15,000 if we went through the state grant, and we said no.
Right.
So there's a bit of a catch-22 here, because if they were to go to the town to ask for this, you don't even know what to ask for, because you don't have the information, because you don't have somebody hired to tell you how much you need to ask for.
Oh, well, they offer you money for, architecture.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the state grants for the, yeah, talking just where we are right now. You don't know how much to ask for if you were going to ask the town.
No, and that's what we
Yeah.
wanted an estimate of the estimate.
Yeah.
We just,
Right.
that's what we need to, because,
I'm going to have to leave shortly.
so that's what I can bring back to the
Yeah.
trustees.
So why don't you bring back where you, where this is to your Board of Trustees, and then see ideas, where they want to go, and we'll keep you on the agenda,
Okay.
and maybe Matt will have some more.
It's tough. It's not like you haven't talked about this. It's
A zillion times.
attached
Yeah.
from a bunch of different angles, kind of.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah.
All right. We've already discussed ARPA funding, and that's being taken care of, and
Yeah, I heard somebody say they have to go.
Yeah,
We awarded the contract for school security cameras. That's ARPA-funded project.
yep,
It's ARPA in the town. Just so folks know, the school committee had to make a decision about how to allocate the funds. The funds that are already appropriated by the town will cover 2 buildings. We will be coming to fall town meeting with a decent-sized request for capital funds through the capital process to do the other 2 buildings. We felt like we wanted to move forward as quickly as possible so we don't lose the ARPA funds, and we address some existing concerns about a couple of the buildings. The other ARPA project is the one I already talked about,
Yep.
which is running water up Depot Street. The engineering is done.
Yep.
We are reviewing the proposed construction plans before we go out to bid. But we will make the deadline. We'll put it out to bid in time.
good. Okay, minutes of July 17th. Any comments, questions?
Couple corrections.
Yep,
The number, letter G,
okay,
last sentence, it says, and they need to push to get his done.
Yeah.
It should be this.
that's right.
And then I, at the end, it said the motion was made and seconded, but didn't say if it passed or not, so we should add the motion passes.
Yep.
And then, number 3, let's see, second sentence, it says, there are 2 projects to be finished up to be done with the building and facilities piece.
Of ARPA.
Should those building, the word building and the word facilities be capitalized? Because it's this board. Or should it just say BFCC piece?
That's
You want that? Because it
probably, yeah. I would think.
acknowledges that's us.
Yes,
So change that to BFCC?
I would think so.
Okay.
Anybody have any problems with that?
And that's all I had.
Anybody else have any? Do I hear a motion?
I make a motion to approve the July 17th, 2024 meeting minutes as amended.
Second.
Motion made by Linda Brown, seconded by Bob Wormy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Upcoming meetings, September 18th and October 16th, again at 10 a.m., unless I hear differently. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
What time is it? Can't see it there.
I can't either. What time? I'm sorry?
Say,
11:27.
I make a motion to adjourn at 11:27.
Second.
Motion made by Linda Brown, seconded by Bob Wormy. All in favor?
Aye.